When Hollywood's sweetest star steps onto a talk show stage, audiences usually expect charm, laughter, and light-hearted conversation. That's exactly what many people thought would happen when Cameron Diaz agreed to appear on the popular daytime talk show The View. Known for her warm personality, effortless humor, and decades of success in Hollywood, Cameron had built a reputation as one of the industry's most approachable and beloved stars. From romantic comedies to blockbuster hits, she had always seemed comfortable in the spotlight, easily navigating interviews with the same relaxed confidence that made audiences adore her on screen. When she accepted the invitation to appear on the show, she expected the typical experience most celebrities have when visiting daytime television. A friendly chat, a few jokes, perhaps some discussion about her latest project, and maybe a personal story or two. For Cameron, it seemed like another routine stop on a promotional tour. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, and certainly nothing that would turn into a viral media moment. The producers had presented the appearance as an opportunity to reconnect with fans, talk about her career, and share some insights into her life beyond the screen. Everything about the invitation suggested a comfortable and supportive environment. But what unfolded that day would be anything but predictable. As the cameras rolled and the familiar theme music of the show echoed through the studio, Cameron walked onto the set with her signature smile. The audience greeted her enthusiastically, applauding the actress who had entertained them for decades. Sitting across from the panel of hosts, she appeared relaxed and ready for a pleasant conversation. Among those hosts was Joy Behar, one of the show's most outspoken personalities, known for her sharp humor and fearless questioning. Joy had built her reputation on asking bold questions and pushing guests beyond the safe, rehearsed answers. Often heard in celebrity interviews, at first the conversation followed the usual pattern. Cameron spoke about her experiences in Hollywood, reflecting on the journey that had taken her from a young actress to an internationally recognized star. She shared stories about working on film sets, collaborating with directors, and balancing fame with her personal life. The atmosphere seemed friendly enough, and the audience responded with laughter and applause as the discussion flowed smoothly. However, beneath the surface, there was a subtle shift in tone that some viewers began to notice. Joy leaned forward slightly in her chair, listening closely as Cameron spoke. Her expression carried the familiar mix of curiosity and skepticism that longtime viewers of the show had come to recognize. While the other hosts seemed content to keep the conversation light and engaging, Joy appeared to be preparing to steer the discussion in a more challenging direction. Then came the moment that changed everything. Joy introduced a question that seemed harmless at first, but carried a sharper edge than anyone expected. Instead of focusing on Cameron's latest work or personal milestones, she brought up a topic that many celebrities prefer to avoid during promotional interviews: controversy. The question caught Cameron slightly off guard. For a brief moment, the actress paused, as though considering how best to respond. The audience sensed the tension immediately. Daytime talk shows rarely drift into uncomfortable territory so quickly, especially when the guest is someone widely admired for her positive public image. Cameron, however, remained composed. She answered carefully, choosing her words with the kind of thoughtfulness that comes from years of media experience. But Joy wasn't finished. She followed up with another question, this one more direct, more pointed, and impossible to ignore. What had begun as a friendly interview was rapidly turning into something far more confrontational. The atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. Some members of the audience leaned forward in their seats, realizing they were witnessing a moment that felt less like a casual talk show segment and more like a heated debate unfolding in real time. Cameron's smile faded slightly as she responded. She wasn't angry, but she was clearly aware that the conversation had moved into unexpected territory. Instead of retreating or giving a vague answer, she chose to address the issue openly. Her response was calm yet firm, demonstrating that the actress was far more prepared for challenging discussions than many might have assumed. As the exchange continued, the tension between Cameron and Joy became increasingly noticeable. Joy pressed her points with the same relentless style that had made her one of the most recognizable voices on the show. Cameron, meanwhile, maintained her composure, refusing to be rattled despite the surprising turn the interview had taken. The other hosts exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or allow the conversation to continue. Moments like this are rare in daytime television, where interviews are usually carefully managed to avoid uncomfortable confrontations. Yet the authenticity of the moment also made it compelling. Viewers could sense that this wasn't a scripted exchange, it was a genuine clash of perspectives unfolding live on air. For the audience watching at home, the interview quickly became unforgettable. Social media lit up as viewers reacted to the unexpected confrontation. Clips of the exchange began circulating online within minutes, with fans debating whether Joy's questions had crossed the line or whether Cameron's responses had revealed a side of the actress rarely seen in public. What made the moment so powerful wasn't just the tension, it was the contrast between expectations and reality. Cameron Diaz had arrived expecting a friendly, promotional conversation. Instead, she found herself navigating a surprisingly intense discussion that tested her poise and resilience in front of millions of viewers. Yet if the situation was meant to unsettle her, Cameron handled it with remarkable grace. She didn't raise her voice or become defensive. Instead, she answered, thoughtfully, occasionally challenging the assumptions behind the questions she was being asked. Her calm demeanor gradually shifted the energy of the conversation, reminding everyone watching that she was far more than just the sweetest star label often attached to her. By the time the segment ended, it was clear that something unusual had taken place. What began as a routine celebrity appearance had transformed into one of the most talked-about interviews of the season. Fans praised Cameron for maintaining her composure under pressure, while critics debated the boundaries between tough journalism and unnecessary confrontation on daytime television. In the days that followed, the moment continued to generate discussion across entertainment media. Commentators analyzed the exchange frame by frame, discussing the dynamics between Cameron Diaz and Joy Behar and the broader implications for celebrity interviews. Some argued that the confrontation demonstrated the importance of honest conversation on talk shows, while others believed the segment had strayed too far from the respectful tone viewers typically expect. Regardless of where people stood on the debate, one thing was undeniable. Cameron Diaz's appearance on The View had become far more than a simple promotional interview. It had turned into a memorable moment of television, one that revealed how quickly the atmosphere of a live broadcast can change and how even the most experienced stars can find themselves facing unexpected challenges. What was supposed to be a relaxed discussion had become a dramatic encounter that audiences would remember for years. And for Cameron Diaz, the experience served as a reminder that in the unpredictable world of live television, even the sweetest star can suddenly find herself in the middle of a confrontation she never saw coming. It was the kind of television moment that producers both fear and secretly know can become unforgettable. For years, there had been whispers of tension behind the scenes, small disagreements, conflicting personalities, and unspoken frustrations that occasionally surfaced in subtle ways. Usually those moments remained hidden from the audience. Television is, after all, carefully managed. Conversations are guided, segments are rehearsed, and producers work tirelessly to make sure every broadcast appears smooth and effortless. But on that particular day, the careful balance that normally kept everything under control began to crack. What had been quietly simmering beneath the surface for a long time suddenly erupted in full view of the cameras. The confrontation unfolded, live, leaving producers scrambling in the control room and viewers at home staring at their screens in disbelief. The guest at the center of the moment was Cameron Diaz, a Hollywood star known for her charm, warmth, and easygoing personality. Over the years, she had built a reputation as one of the most approachable actresses in the entertainment industry. Interviews with her were usually light, humorous, and full of laughter. She rarely seemed rattled, even when conversations drifted into more personal topics. But this time was different. As the discussion continued during her appearance on The View, the atmosphere shifted in ways no one had anticipated. The questions grew sharper, the tone more confrontational, and the energy in the studio noticeably heavier. Sitting across the table was one of the show's most outspoken hosts, Joy Behar, a figure well known for her blunt humor and willingness to challenge guests directly. For a while, Cameron tried to keep the conversation relaxed. She smiled, answered thoughtfully, and even laughed at a few lighter comments. But as the exchange continued, it became clear that something deeper was brewing beneath the polite surface of the interview. The audience sensed it too. There's a certain feeling that spreads through a television studio when something unexpected is happening. Conversations quiet down, laughter fades, and people begin leaning forward in their seats. Even those watching from home can feel the shift in energy through the screen. That morning, the shift was impossible to ignore. Joy continued pressing Cameron with questions that seemed less like friendly curiosity and more like pointed challenges. Each question seemed designed to push the conversation into more controversial territory. At first, Cameron responded calmly, choosing her words carefully. But the tone of the exchange kept intensifying. Back in the control room, producers began exchanging worried glances. Live television doesn't leave much room for correction. Once something is said on air, there's no way to rewind the moment. The director quietly debated whether to cut to a commercial break earlier than planned, but the segment was already attracting intense viewer attention. Moments like this could send ratings soaring, but they could also spiral out of control. On the stage, the other hosts appeared increasingly uncomfortable. Some shifted in their chairs. Others attempted to lighten the mood with small jokes or brief comments, but the tension between Cameron and Joy had already become the focal point of the conversation. Then came the moment that would define the entire interview. Joy delivered another remark, one that seemed to cross an invisible line. The comment hung in the air for a moment, heavier than anything that had been said before. The audience fell almost completely silent. Cameron looked directly across the table. Her expression had changed. The easygoing smile that usually accompanied her interviews was gone, replaced by something far more serious. For several seconds, she didn't speak. When she finally responded, her voice was calm, but unmistakably firm. Instead of deflecting the comment or laughing it off, she addressed it directly. Her words carried a quiet confidence that instantly shifted the power dynamic of the conversation. Joy appeared momentarily stunned. The audience could feel that something unusual was happening, something that had clearly not been part of the show's plan for the morning. Cameron continued speaking, explaining her perspective in a way that was both thoughtful and unyielding. The other hosts exchanged quick glances, unsure whether to intervene or allow the moment to unfold naturally. Backstage, producers were now fully scrambling. Assistants whispered instructions into headsets while the director watched the monitors closely, calculating whether the situation could still be steered back into calmer territory. But the moment had already taken on a life of its own. Cameron's remarks grew more pointed, though she never raised her voice. Instead, she spoke with the kind of clarity that often carries more weight than anger. Each sentence seemed carefully chosen, each response measured yet powerful. Joy, who was rarely left without something to say, appeared unusually quiet. For perhaps the first time in the segment, she seemed unsure how to respond. The audience reacted with a mixture of surprise and fascination. Some people clapped softly, while others simply watched in stunned silence. It was one of those rare television moments where everyone in the room could sense they were witnessing something that would be talked about long after the broadcast ended. Eventually, Cameron paused and looked around the table. The tension in the room was thick enough to feel. After a brief moment, she thanked the audience politely and pushed her chair back. Without raising her voice or making a dramatic scene, she stood up. For a split second, no one moved. The cameras continued rolling, capturing the surprised expressions of the hosts as Cameron calmly walked away from the table. It wasn't a storming exit filled with shouting or anger. In many ways, it was even more powerful than that. Her quiet decision to leave spoke volumes about how the conversation had unfolded. As she disappeared off stage, the studio remained strangely silent. Joy sat still, clearly processing what had just happened. The other hosts looked visibly uncomfortable, unsure how to continue the show after such an unexpected moment. Within minutes, clips of the exchange began circulating online. Viewers who had been watching live rushed to social media to discuss what they had just witnessed. Some praised Cameron for standing her ground, while others debated whether the interview had gone too far. But no matter what side people took, one thing was certain. The segment had instantly become one of the most talked about moments in the history of the show. And if you want to see exactly how the situation unfolded, from the calm beginning to the dramatic conclusion, make sure you stay tuned. Stories like this don't just happen overnight. The events that led to that unforgettable moment began much earlier that morning. In fact, the day had started like any other inside the studios of The View. The building buzzed with its usual early morning energy. Crew members moved quickly through the hallways carrying equipment. Producers reviewed scripts for upcoming segments, and assistants checked schedules to make sure every guest appearance ran on time. Not long after sunrise, Cameron Diaz arrived at the studio. She stepped into the green room with the same warm presence that had made her a favorite among television hosts for years. Her radiant smile immediately brightened the room as she greeted the staff and began chatting casually with the production team. To anyone watching, it looked like the beginning of another ordinary day in daytime television. No one could have guessed that within a few hours, that ordinary morning would turn into one of the most dramatic moments the show had ever experienced. The production assistants moved quietly around the studio, making the final preparations that every live television broadcast requires. Clipboards were checked, microphones were tested, and the familiar rhythm of a daytime show preparing to go live filled the air. For most of the crew, it was simply another morning at the studio of The View, a place where interviews, laughter, and debates happened almost every day. For the guest of the morning, however, the atmosphere carried a subtle difference that was difficult to explain. Cameron Diaz had visited the show several times throughout her long career. She was comfortable with the format, familiar with the hosts, and well aware of how the conversations usually flowed. Most of her previous appearances had been lively and friendly, filled with playful banter and the kind of relaxed storytelling that audiences loved. Because of that history, Cameron had arrived expecting another enjoyable discussion. She greeted the staff warmly as she entered the green room, exchanging quick hugs and friendly jokes with the makeup artists and production assistants who had helped prepare countless guests before her. There was a sense of familiarity in the air, as if she were returning to a place she had visited many times before. Still, something about the day felt slightly unusual from the moment she stepped onto the set. It wasn't anything obvious. The lights were the same, the audience was energetic, and the hosts were preparing for the segment just as they always did. Yet Cameron sensed a certain tension beneath the surface, the kind that sometimes exists in live television when something unpredictable might happen. As the opening theme music faded and the cameras began rolling, the hosts welcomed viewers to another episode of the show. The audience applauded enthusiastically as the panel turned their attention toward the guest chair where Cameron sat. One of the first to greet her was Whoopi Goldberg, whose warm presence had long been a defining part of the program. She leaned slightly toward Cameron with a friendly smile and spoke in the relaxed tone that viewers recognized immediately. "So good to have you back," Whoopi said warmly as the cameras focused on the two of them. "You look fantastic as always." The compliment drew laughter and applause from the audience. Cameron smiled, clearly appreciating the warm welcome. Over the years, she had developed a comfortable rapport with many of the hosts, and moments like this often helped set the tone for the rest of the interview. "Thank you, Whoopi," she replied graciously. "It's always a pleasure to be here." "With you ladies!" Her voice carried the easy confidence that had become part of her public image. She leaned back slightly in her chair, her posture relaxed, radiating the effortless charm that had helped make her one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. The audience responded with another round of applause. For a moment, everything felt exactly as it should during a celebrity interview, light-hearted, friendly, and filled with positive energy. The cameras then shifted toward another host seated nearby, Sarah Haynes. Known for her enthusiastic style and genuine curiosity, Sarah often guided conversations toward personal stories that audiences could relate to. She leaned forward with a bright smile, clearly excited to begin her part of the discussion. "Cameron, it's so great to have you here again," Sarah said, her tone animated. "Every time you come on the show, you bring such incredible stories with you." Cameron laughed softly, nodding in agreement. "Well, you know," she said playfully, "life has a way of giving you plenty of stories if you stick around long." Enough. The comment drew another wave of laughter from both the hosts and the audience. Sarah continued by asking about Cameron's recent projects and how her life had evolved over the past few years. The conversation flowed naturally at first, touching on everything from the challenges of working in Hollywood to the importance of maintaining balance between career and personal life. Cameron spoke thoughtfully about her experiences, occasionally pausing to reflect before answering. She described the excitement of returning to creative work, the lessons she had learned throughout her career, and the ways in which her priorities had shifted as she matured. As she spoke, the audience listened attentively. Many of them had followed her career for decades, watching her rise from a young actress into an international star known for films that blended humor, action, and heartfelt storytelling. Sarah nodded along with interest, occasionally chiming in with brief comments or follow-up questions. The two shared a few humorous moments that reminded viewers why Cameron's interviews were often so enjoyable to watch. Across the table, the other hosts listened as well. Some smiled at Cameron's anecdotes, while others appeared to be waiting for the right moment to jump into the conversation. Among them was Joy Behar, who sat quietly for the moment, observing the exchange with her characteristic half-smile. Long-time viewers knew that Joy often waited patiently before introducing a question that shifted the direction of the discussion. At that point, however, the atmosphere still felt comfortable. Cameron continued sharing stories about the early days of her career, recalling the excitement and nervousness she had felt when she first entered the film industry. She spoke about learning to navigate fame, dealing with public expectations, and finding her own voice in an environment that could sometimes be overwhelming. The audience seemed captivated by her honesty. Sarah responded with enthusiasm, asking Cameron how those early experiences had shaped the way she approached her work today. Cameron explained that over time, she had learned to value authenticity more than anything else. Success, she said, wasn't just about box office numbers or awards. It was about staying true to who you are despite the pressures of the industry. Her words resonated with many viewers. For a few minutes, the conversation felt almost inspirational, touching on themes of growth, resilience, and self-discovery. The studio audience listened carefully, occasionally applauding when Cameron made a particularly thoughtful point. Yet even during those positive moments, there was still a subtle undercurrent of tension that a few people began to notice. The kind of tension that often appears when a conversation is slowly building toward something more serious. The cameras continued moving from one host to another, capturing their reactions as the discussion unfolded. What no one watching could fully predict was how dramatically the tone of the interview would change once certain questions began to surface. For now, however, the conversation remained friendly. Cameron sat comfortably in her chair, smiling as she answered Sarah's questions, unaware that the discussion was slowly moving toward a moment that would soon capture the attention of viewers across the country.